My name is Isabel Carter. I'm 29 years old, and until recently, I was just another senior data analyst at Corlex Innovations in Boston. That was before I built something that would change everything for me, for Corlex, and for the entire predictive analytics industry. The morning I decided to present my AI forecasting tool to the board started like any other. I woke up at 5, checked my algorithms one last time, and rehearsed my pitch in front of the bathroom mirror until my voice was steady and confident. By the time I arrived at Corlex's glass and steel headquarters, my hands were trembling slightly. But my resolve was firm. I'd spent 6 months of sleepless nights perfecting this tool. Today was the day the company would see its potential. The boardroom was intimidating by design, a long mahogany table surrounded by ergonomic chairs, each occupied by someone who could either elevate or destroy my career with a single nod. At the head of the table sat Michael Ford, director of analytics and the man whose approval I needed most. His perpetually furrowed brow and thin-lipped smile had become the stuff of legend among the junior analysts. Michael didn't just reject ideas, he crushed them, along with the spirits of those who proposed them. "Ms. Carter," he said, glancing at his watch. "You have 15 minutes. Please don't waste our time." I took a deep breath and opened my laptop. "Thank you for this opportunity," I began, connecting to the projector. "What I'm about to show you is a new approach to predictive analytics that I believe will revolutionize how we forecast for our clients." My presentation was concise and data-driven. I showed them how my AI tool had accurately predicted seasonal demand fluctuations across 3 different sectors, with 94% accuracy significantly outperforming our current systems. I demonstrated how it could adapt in real time to market shifts, something our existing forecasting tools couldn't do. I explained how it could save millions in inventory management for our retail clients and optimize logistics chains for maximum efficiency. For a moment, I thought I'd gotten through to them. Jennifer from marketing leaned forward with interest. Even the CFO was nodding thoughtfully. But then Michael Ford cleared his throat, and the room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Let me get this straight," he said, leaning back in his chair. "You've developed, in your spare time, an AI forecasting tool that outperforms systems our company has spent millions developing with entire teams of data scientists." "Yes," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "The approach is different. I've implemented a hybrid model that—" "A tool this advanced is just a fantasy," Michael interrupted, a condescending smile spreading across his face. "What you're proposing would require computational resources and algorithmic innovations that are years beyond our current capabilities. You've clearly manipulated these test results to make your little project look impressive." The room fell silent. I felt heat rising to my cheeks, but I forced myself to remain composed. "The results are real," I insisted. "I'd be happy to run live demonstrations under any controlled conditions you'd like to establish." Michael waved his hand dismissively. "That won't be necessary. We're not going to waste company resources chasing fairy tales. Corlex is committed to realistic, proven technologies, not science fiction projects cobbled together by overambitious analysts." Several board members chuckled, avoiding eye contact with me. The CFO's interest had vanished, replaced by what looked like second-hand embarrassment. Only Jennifer still seemed troubled, her brow furrowed as she studied the data on her tablet. "Thank you for your time," I said quietly, disconnecting my laptop from the projector. My hands were steady now, driven by a cold, crystallizing anger that was replacing my initial humiliation. As I packed up my materials, Michael added a final blow. "Perhaps focus on your assigned projects moving forward, Isabel. Leave the innovation to the R&D team. They understand the real limitations we're working with." I nodded silently and walked out of the boardroom with my head held high. Even as I felt their eyes on my back, some pitying, some amused, none believing. The door closed behind me with a soft click that somehow felt louder than a slam would have. In the elevator down to my floor, I stood alone, clutching my laptop to my chest. The rejection stung. Yes, but something else was happening too. A resolve was hardening within me. Michael Ford had just made the biggest mistake of his career. And someday, he would realize it. I returned to my cubicle and stared at my screen, not really seeing the spreadsheets and data visualizations that populated it. Around me, the office hummed with the usual activity phones ringing, keyboards clicking, the occasional burst of laughter from the break room. None of it seemed to touch me. I was already somewhere else, planning my next move. That evening, I stayed late, waiting until most of my colleagues had left. Then I carefully copied my personal project files onto an encrypted external drive. I'd developed the tool on my own time, using my own equipment at home. But I'd tested it with anonymized datasets from work. Nothing proprietary. Nothing that violated my employment contract. I'd been careful about that from the beginning, almost as if I'd anticipated this day. On my way out, I passed Michael's office. The light was still on, and through the glass wall, I could see him hunched over his desk, reviewing reports for the Wilson account, our biggest client, and one whose forecasting needs had been causing headaches for months. I watched him for a moment, wondering if he had any idea what he'd just turned down. Then I walked to the elevator, rode down to the lobby, and stepped out into the cool Boston evening. Instead of taking my usual route home, I found myself walking to a small coffee shop several blocks away. I ordered a double espresso, found a corner table, and opened my laptop. For the next 3 hours, I worked feverishly, refining my code, improving the interface, and planning what would come next. By the time the barista announced they were closing, I had made a decision. If Acrylex didn't want my innovation, I would take it elsewhere. But first, I would make it better, so much better that its rejection would haunt Michael Ford for the rest of his career. The next few weeks passed in a blur. By day, I was the model employee arriving on time, completing my assigned tasks efficiently, offering helpful insights during team meetings. If anyone noticed that I was quieter than usual, they didn't mention it. At night, though, I transformed into something else entirely. My small apartment became command central for what I now thought of as my real job. I converted my spare bedroom into a makeshift lab, setting up old servers I'd purchased secondhand and configuring them to run my increasingly complex algorithms. My dining table disappeared under a sea of notepads filled with equations and flowcharts. I slept 4 hours a night, maximum, fueled by caffeine and determination. The tool itself was evolving rapidly. What had started as a relatively straightforward predictive model was becoming something more sophisticated, more intuitive. I named it Clairvoyant Metrics, partly as a joke at Michael's expense. If he thought predictive AI was fantasy, I'd lean into the metaphor. One night, about 3 weeks after the board meeting, I was debugging a particularly tricky segment of code when my phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Jared Kim, a junior analyst who'd joined a Corlex around the same time I had. Heard about what happened in the board meeting? Ford's an idiot. If you're still working on your project, I'd like to help. No strings attached. I stared at the message for a long time. Jared was brilliant, that much I knew from our limited interactions at work. He had a knack for spotting patterns in data that others missed. Having his input could be valuable, but it was also a risk. Could I trust him to keep this secret? After careful consideration, I invited him over the following evening. When he arrived, I made him sign an NDA before showing him anything homemade and probably not legally binding, but it set the tone. Then I walked him through what I'd built. Jared's eyes widened as he watched Clairvoyant Metrics process and analyze a test dataset I'd created. This is... He paused, searching for the right word. This is revolutionary. Isabel. You think so? I asked, trying not to sound too eager for validation. I know so, he replied, already scrolling through my code with the intensity of someone who'd found buried treasure. The neural network architecture you've designed here, it's unlike anything I've seen before. And the way you're handling temporal data, it's elegant. Over the next few months, Jared became my secret partner in crime. We'd work our regular hours at a Corlex, careful not to arouse suspicion, then meet at my apartment to continue developing Clairvoyant Metrics. His expertise in machine learning complemented my strengths in statistical modeling and UI design. Together, we pushed the tool to heights I hadn't imagined possible. While we worked in secret, things at a Corlex were deteriorating. The company had invested heavily in a commercial forecasting system, a $2 million package that Michael Ford had championed as the solution to all our analytical needs. It was a bloated, rigid system that required extensive customization and still delivered mediocre results. The Wilson account, in particular, was becoming a problem. Their inventory management was in chaos, with millions in losses due to inaccurate demand forecasting. I watched from the sidelines, saying nothing as Michael held emergency meetings and drafted increasingly desperate strategies to fix the issues. Sometimes, in quiet moments, I imagined walking into his office and showing him what clairvoyant metrics could do, how it could solve the very problems that were now threatening the company's reputation. But the memory of his dismissive smirk was enough to keep me silent. By the 6-month mark, clairvoyant metrics was no longer just a forecasting tool. It had evolved into a comprehensive analytics platform that could not only predict market trends with remarkable accuracy, but also suggest optimal responses to those trends. We tested it against historical data from various industries, and the results were consistently impressive. "We need to start thinking about what comes next," Jared said one evening as we reviewed the latest test results. "This is too good to keep to ourselves, Isabel." I nodded slowly. The same thought had been circling my mind for weeks. "I've been looking into what it would take to launch a startup," I admitted. "But we'd need funding, and I don't have connections in the venture capital world." Jared grinned. "Actually, I might be able to help with that. My cousin works for an angel investor who specializes in AI startups. If you're willing, I could arrange a meeting." The opportunity both excited and terrified me. Going public with clairvoyant metrics would mean potentially facing legal challenges from a Corlex, even though I'd been careful to ensure I wasn't using any proprietary information. It would mean leaving the security of my job and stepping into the uncertain world of entrepreneurship. But it would also mean freedom from Michael Ford's dismissive attitude and the chance to prove him catastrophically wrong. "Set up the meeting," I said. 2 weeks later, I found myself sitting across from Catherine Lin, a sharp-eyed investor whose reputation for identifying promising AI technologies had earned her the nickname the algorithm whisperer in tech circles. Jared had warned me that she was tough but fair. She wouldn't invest in something unless she truly believed in its potential. I demonstrated clairvoyant metrics using anonymized retail data, showing how it could predict seasonal demand fluctuations, identify emerging trends before they became obvious, and recommend inventory adjustments that would maximize profits while minimizing waste. Catherine watched in silence, occasionally asking pointed questions that revealed her deep understanding of both the technical and business aspects of what I was showing her. When the demonstration concluded, she leaned back in her chair, studying me with an intensity that made me nervous. "Your technology is impressive," she said finally. "But I'm more interested in you, Ms. Carter. Why are you doing this? What's driving you?" The question caught me off guard. I'd prepared to discuss algorithms and market opportunities, not my personal motivations. For a moment, I considered giving her the sanitized version, talking about innovation and market disruption in the abstract. But something in her direct gaze told me that honesty would serve me better. "I built something valuable," I said. "Something that could help businesses make better decisions and avoid costly mistakes." When I presented it to my current employer, they dismissed it as fantasy. They laughed at me. Now I want to prove them wrong. A slow smile spread across Catherine's face. "Revenge as a motivator, not what I expected, but I can work with that." She offered me $150,000 in seed funding in exchange for a 10% stake in the company. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to rent a small office space, purchase the necessary hardware, and give me a runway of about 6 months to get clairvoyant metrics market ready. Most importantly, it would allow me to leave a Corlex and focus on my startup full-time. Before accepting, I consulted with a lawyer to ensure I wouldn't be violating my employment agreement. The attorney confirmed what I'd suspected since I'd developed the tool on my own time, using my own resources, and without using a Corlex's proprietary information. The intellectual property belonged to me. Still, she advised me to be cautious about how and when I left the company to minimize the risk of litigation. Following her advice, I submitted my resignation the next day, citing a desire to explore new opportunities without mentioning my startup plans. Michael Ford accepted my resignation with barely concealed indifference, not even bothering to conduct an exit interview. It was as if he'd already forgotten his role in setting these events in motion. My last day at Acorlex was anticlimactic. I cleared out my desk, said goodbye to a few colleagues, and walked out the front door without looking back. Jared would be joining me at the startup in a few weeks, after wrapping up his current projects to avoid raising suspicions. The first few months of building my company were both exhilarating and terrifying. Catherine introduced me to a network of mentors and potential clients who could help get Clairvoyant Metrics off the ground. I officially registered the company as Clairvoyant Analytics, with myself as CEO and Jared as CTO. We rented a small office in a co-working space filled with other startups, most of them focused on various aspects of tech. Our neighbors included a cryptocurrency security firm, a sustainable packaging design company, and a team developing AI-powered language learning tools. The environment was energizing. Everyone was building something they believed in, fighting against the odds to make their visions reality. Our first client was a medium-sized clothing retailer struggling with inventory management across their 20 locations. They'd been burned by expensive forecasting systems in the past and were skeptical of our claims. We offered them a deal we'd analyze their historical data for free, provide forecasts for the upcoming season, and they'd only pay us if our predictions proved more accurate than their current methods. 3 months later, they signed a contract worth $50,000 annually after Clairvoyant Metrics outperformed their existing system by a significant margin. Word began to spread within the retail industry about the uncannily accurate forecasting tool developed by a former Acorlex analyst. As our client base grew, so did our team. We hired 2 data scientists, a software engineer, and a sales director who had extensive contacts in the retail and logistics industries. Catherine continued to provide guidance and introduced us to a second round of investors who were impressed by our early traction. About 8 months after leaving Acorlex, I was reviewing potential client accounts when Jared burst into my office, his face flushed with excitement. "You need to see this," he said, placing his tablet in front of me. It was an article from a prominent business technology publication titled, "Acorlex Innovations Loses Wilson Account Amid Forecasting Failures." I scanned the article, my heart racing. According to the report, Wilson Enterprises, Acorlex's biggest client, had terminated their contract after a series of catastrophic inventory management failures had cost them millions. The article specifically mentioned the inadequacy of Acorlex's forecasting systems and quoted an anonymous source who revealed that the company had rejected an internally developed solution in favor of an expensive commercial system that ultimately failed to deliver. "Someone talked," Jared said, his eyes wide. "Someone who was in that boardroom when Michael shot down your presentation." I thought of Jennifer from marketing, how she'd been the only one to show genuine interest in my data. "Doesn't matter now," I said, pushing the tablet back toward Jared. "What matters is that we're building something better." But privately, I couldn't help feeling a surge of vindication. Michael Ford's decision was coming back to haunt him, just as I'd hoped it would. The next day, I received an unexpected email from Wilson Enterprises' Chief Operations Officer. They'd heard about Clairvoyant Analytics from industry contacts and were interested in discussing potential solutions to their forecasting challenges. The irony wasn't lost on me. The very client whose needs had partially inspired my creation of Clairvoyant Metrics was now approaching me directly. The meeting with Wilson's executive team was scheduled for the following week at their headquarters. I prepared meticulously, knowing this could be a turning point for Clairvoyant Analytics. Landing a client of Wilson's size and reputation would not only provide significant revenue, but also establish us as a serious player in the predictive analytics market. When I walked into Wilson's conference room, I was surprised to find Jennifer from Acorlex's marketing department sitting among the Wilson executives. She smiled at me, not at all surprised by my presence. "Isabel," she said, standing to shake my hand. "I've been telling the team here about your impressive forecasting tool. I'm consulting for Wilson now, helping them rebuild after the Acorlex debacle. The presentation went smoothly. I demonstrated how clairvoyant metrics could address the specific challenges Wilson had faced, showing them projections based on anonymized data similar to their industry profile. Their COO asked tough questions, but I could see he was impressed by the system's capabilities and the confidence with which I answered his queries. After the meeting, Jennifer pulled me aside. "I wanted to reach out to you directly after you left Acorlex," she said, lowering her voice. "I knew Michael had made a terrible mistake, but by the time I worked up the courage, you were gone." "How bad is it at Acorlex?" I asked, curiosity getting the better of me. "Bad," she replied grimly. "They've lost 3 major clients besides Wilson. Michael is on thin ice, but he's still blaming everyone but himself. The board is considering drastic measures." 2 days later, Wilson Enterprises signed a contract with Clairvoyant Analytics worth $1.2 million annually, more than twice the size of our previous largest contract. The news spread quickly through the industry, and suddenly we were fielding calls from companies that wouldn't have given us the time of day a month earlier. Our growth accelerated dramatically. Within a year of founding the company, we had 20 employees, over 50 clients, and were consistently profitable. Catherine's initial investment had been repaid many times over, and she frequently cited Clairvoyant Analytics as one of her most successful investments. I was so focused on building and growing the company that I barely paid attention to what was happening at Acorlex. Occasionally, I'd hear snippets from former colleagues who'd reached out after learning of my success, but I tried not to dwell on it. The best revenge, I'd decided, was success, and by that measure, I was winning handily. Then came the day that changed everything again. I was in the middle of a strategy meeting with my executive team when my assistant interrupted to inform me that someone from Bluepoint Analytics was waiting in the reception area. Bluepoint was Acorlex's biggest competitor, a multinational corporation with resources that dwarfed our small startup. They'd recently been making waves with aggressive expansion plans and several high-profile acquisitions of AI startups. The visitor was Adrian Chen, Bluepoint's Chief Innovation Officer. He was polite but direct. Bluepoint had been monitoring our progress and was impressed by what we'd built. They were interested in discussing potential synergies between our companies. Synergies, of course, was corporate speak for acquisition. Bluepoint wanted to buy Clairvoyant Analytics. My initial reaction was skepticism. I'd built this company from the ground up, turning Michael Ford's rejection into motivation to create something truly valuable. The idea of selling to a corporate giant ran counter to everything that had driven me over the past year and a half. But Adrian was persuasive. He talked about how Bluepoint could provide the resources and global reach that would allow Clairvoyant Metrics to achieve its full potential. He emphasized that they didn't want to absorb and dismantle our company, they wanted to acquire it as a standalone subsidiary, with me remaining as CEO and maintaining significant autonomy. "We don't want to change what you've built," he said. "We want to amplify it." I promised to consider their offer and discuss it with my team and investors. After Adrian left, I called an emergency meeting with Jared and our other key executives. Opinions were divided. Some saw the potential benefits of Bluepoint's resources and distribution network, while others worried about losing our independence and innovative culture. Catherine, when consulted, was pragmatic. "This is how the game works," she said. "You build something valuable, and eventually, the big fish come circling. The question isn't whether to sell, it's whether this is the right time and the right buyer." Over the next few weeks, I engaged in intense negotiations with Bluepoint's acquisition team. If we were going to sell, I was determined to ensure the best possible outcome for everyone who had believed in Clairvoyant Analytics, our employees, our investors, and our clients. The final offer exceeded my wildest expectations, $125 million in cash and stock, with guarantees of operational independence, retention bonuses for all employees, and a personal 3-year contract for me to continue leading the company with significantly expanded resources. After consulting with our board and legal team, I accepted the offer. The news was announced publicly the following week, sending shockwaves through the predictive analytics industry. Overnight, I went from being the founder of a promising startup to a multimillionaire whose technology was now backed by one of the industry's biggest players. The day after the announcement, I received a text message from Jennifer. Check your email. You'll want to see this. In my inbox was a forwarded internal memo from a Corlex. The subject line read, Executive Leadership Changes. Michael Ford had been removed from his position as Director of Analytics, effective immediately. The memo cited strategic missteps and failure to recognize and nurture innovative solutions among the reasons for his departure. I felt a complex mix of emotions, satisfaction, yes, but also a strange emptiness. For nearly 2 years, proving Michael wrong had been a powerful motivator, driving me through countless late nights and challenging obstacles. Now that he had faced consequences for his arrogance, I found myself wondering what would drive me now. The answer came a few weeks later. During my first major meeting at Bluepoint's headquarters, I was presenting Clairvoyant Metrics' roadmap to their executive team when Adrian Chen interrupted with an unexpected question. Isabel, he said, what do you think is the next frontier for predictive analytics? Where should we be looking beyond what Clairvoyant Metrics already does brilliantly? I paused, considering the question carefully. In that moment, I realized that while vindication had been a powerful initial motivator, the real satisfaction had come from building something genuinely valuable, something that solved real problems and pushed the boundaries of what was possible. I think the future lies in predictive systems that don't just forecast what will happen, but actively help shape better outcomes. I said, ideas flowing faster than I could articulate them. Imagine AI that doesn't just tell a retailer what products will be in demand next season, but helps them design those products based on emerging consumer preferences. Or logistics systems that don't just predict supply chain disruptions, but automatically develop and implement mitigation strategies. As I spoke, I could see the excitement building in the room. These weren't just abstract concepts, they were the next evolution of what we'd already built. Practical innovations that could create enormous value. That's exactly why we acquired Clairvoyant, Adrian said, smiling broadly. Not just for what you've already created, but for where you'll take us next. 3 months after the acquisition, I found myself back in Boston for a major industry conference. Bluepoint had arranged for me to deliver a keynote address about the future of AI and predictive analytics. The irony wasn't lost on me less than 2 years earlier. I couldn't even get the Corlex board to take my ideas seriously. Now I was addressing thousands of industry professionals as a recognized innovator. As I waited backstage for my introduction, I spotted a familiar face in the green room, Jennifer, now Wilson Enterprises' Chief Marketing Officer. She rushed over to greet me with a warm hug. I have something to tell you, she said, her eyes twinkling with mischief. Guess who just applied for a mid-level analytics position at Wilson? I raised an eyebrow. Not Michael Ford himself, she confirmed. Apparently, he's had trouble finding a new position at his previous level. His resume crossed my desk yesterday. What are you going to do? I asked. Jennifer shrugged. That's not my department, thankfully. But word is he'll get an interview, at least. Karma has a way of coming full circle, doesn't it? Before I could respond, the conference organizer approached to let me know it was almost time for my speech. Jennifer squeezed my arm encouragingly and whispered, "Knock 'em dead. Show them all what they missed." As I walked onto the stage to enthusiastic applause, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. The rejection that had initially crushed me had become the catalyst for something far greater than I'd originally imagined. I had built a company, developed a revolutionary technology, secured life-changing financial success, and was now positioned to shape the future of an entire industry. I adjusted the microphone and looked out at the sea of faces, industry leaders, potential partners, perhaps even future competitors. Somewhere in that audience, there might be another innovative thinker whose ideas were being dismissed, whose potential was being underestimated. 2 years ago, I began. I was told that what I was trying to build was just a fantasy. Today, I'm here to talk about how that fantasy is transforming how businesses make decisions and how the next wave of innovations will push those boundaries even further. The room fell silent as I continued, every person hanging on my words. In that moment, I felt a profound sense of vindication. Not just because I had proven Michael Ford wrong, but because I had proven myself right. I had trusted my vision when others wouldn't, persevered when it would have been easier to give up, and built something that was genuinely changing the world. As my presentation concluded to thunderous applause, I realized that the most valuable lesson from this journey wasn't about revenge or validation. It was about the power of believing in your own ideas even when no one else does. Michael Ford's dismissal hadn't been the end of my story. It had been the beginning of a much bigger one. Outside the conference hall, Boston's skyline gleamed in the afternoon sun. Somewhere in that cityscape was the Corlex building where I'd once been just another analyst with a bold idea. I smiled at the thought of how far I'd come and how much further I still had to go. My phone buzzed with a message from Adrian. Board loves your new research direction. Green light for the expanded R&D budget. Let's change the world. I texted back a simple reply, already on it. Then I pocketed my phone and hailed a taxi. The future was waiting. And this time, I wouldn't need anyone's permission to create it.